you can even have like a school that does try to get the best out of kids and just try to get the best out of their academics and still have it be humane and still have it be meaningful. And so some of that, though, is intentional by the other educators. Like the person who's teaching like photography or design will talk about how art is a escape for an anxiety disorder or his anxiety issues. Or, you know, you have the English teachers talking about writing as a coping mechanism and understanding how to tell your story. Or you have history teachers talking about the emotional effects of historical events instead of just, here was a genocide, here was war, here was this thing.
Welcome to Normalize the Conversation by Inspiring My Generation. I'm your host, Francesca Reicheter. Today, I'm joined by Ross Szabo, a mental health advocate, author, and founding faculty member at Geffen Academy at UCLA. After struggling with depression and attempting to take his own life as a teenager, Ross dedicated his life to transforming the way schools approach mental health education. In today's episode, we talk about why students are more overwhelmed than ever and the emotional life skills schools often fail to teach. From academic pressure and identity struggles to relationships, coping skills, and mental health literacy, this conversation explores how we can normalize these conversations earlier and create environments where young people feel supported instead of alone. Ross, thank you so much for joining me today. I am very excited for our conversation, but before we begin, I want to check in. How are you really?
So today I'm feeling pretty good. My seniors are leaving. They finished school early, and so I've just had a couple last classes with them. And you know, it's those mixed emotions where you're like so happy and excited to see what they do next, but also gonna miss them. And then you know, teachers' lives can go so many different ways, but I'm actually doing well. How are you doing?
I love the end of the school year. It's very, I don't want to say like sad, but it's really exciting to see like how much I always liked seeing like what my reactions were to my teachers, right? Like how many of them I was like, oh wow, I really loved that class and that teacher and how much of an impact it made on me. I would sit there and reflect on all of it. I'd also write myself letters about the year. So maybe a little bit different as a kid, but I am doing well today. So my brother was here for Coachella and my floors, you couldn't see them. He made a giant mess with all of his boxes of things he ordered and left for me to return for him. So loving that, but I'm happy. I'm happy he was here, happy he's gone, and I have space to breathe again. But I'm
Did you
doing
get to go to Coachella
really...
too, or no?
What'd you say?
Did you get to go to Coachella too, or?
No, he didn't invite me. He just decided he was going to come here and take my car and go to Coachella and leave my place in that. So I love that. Little brothers are great.
They need the support.
Yeah, but today also, one of my younger cousins texted me. She was like, I need to talk. And I was like, what's going on? She's like, I'm so overwhelmed in school and they're not teaching us how to like manage it. She's a senior and she's waiting for like college admissions to come out. And there's so much stress on having like really good grades, especially at this point, because they threaten like, oh, the college is going to take away your admission if you don't keep it up. So she's been so stressed and she's freaking out. So she's called me. She's like, after school, I need you to help me figure out a self-care plan. So I'm excited to do that with her.
No, that is exciting. And yeah, that speaks to so many people in her position right now too, that are struggling and hoping to figure out their whole future, which is like not a small thing.
No, it's not. Especially she just turned 18? I know she's 18, but that's such a big like question at that point, especially when we're asking kids at 14, we're asking them at 18, determine their whole life. And they're just trying to figure out where you fit in the world. Like I remember being a senior and everyone saying like where you went to college determined everything and what major you picked. It was so much stress on top of just the regular stress of navigating like the hormones of being an 18-year-old and your mind changing and growing and the realities of the world. And now this is the first time you get to vote And so now you're becoming more aware of everything happening in the world. You're online all the time. There's a lot more responsibility. How do you even navigate that on top of the pressures that they're putting on you to figure out your entire future today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then like when they get to college too, I had a bunch of my college freshmen come back to talk to our seniors about adjusting to freshman year. And it was interesting to hear a lot of them say they spent so much of high school like thinking about, all right, I got to get to college. But then when they got to college, they started kind of freaking out about what's going to happen after college. So is there ever a moment where young people are like, oh, I'm good? Or are they always just kind of like, oh no, like I, want to get out of high school and then like, oh no, what am I going to do with my future?
Yes. Oh my goodness. I remember that. And I everyone was like, technology is the future, so go into tech. So I did a master's in information systems, which in theory sounded like a good idea. I hated like technology. Like I can't, not my thing, trying to learn how to code. But everyone was telling me that's what I should do. So I listened to everyone else and felt so lost and confused. And I think that's such a big thing at that age. You're trying to figure it out. People are telling you what you should do. And then if you go and do it and it's not you, it's like, for me, it was like, what's wrong with me? This is what I should be doing. How come I'm not good at it? How come I'm not enjoying it? Something is wrong with me. And I internalized all that is my identity.
Yeah, and that identity piece can filter into so many other spirals and filter into so many like kind of mental health challenges and things like that too. And that's why it is, I think, so important to have conversations in school about what your future is going to be, like in just a real way, because academics are academics. You're going to get to your college and you're not going to be the smartest person at your college anyway. But how are you going to adjust to the stuff you're talking about? Like the real things that affect your identity and what you pursue in life.
Yes. I was 20 when I ended up in the psych unit. And the first thing that I said when I came out, I was like, why did no one prepare me? Why did no one help me with tools to navigate like all these stressors and pressures that were coming up and that are probably going to continue for the rest of my life? I don't know. I'm 27. So far, it hasn't stopped. But it's like, no, how did no one prepare me? Why did I sit through 2 years of calculus, 2 years of physics, 2 years of chemistry, but never once did someone sit down and explain like how to check in with myself or explain coping skills, self-care practices, boundaries, setting goals that worked for me, my values, where I fit in. I never learned any single thing that was a useful life skill. I learned math and science, which is not important. I'm sure if I was going into those fields, it would be very, very important. But for me, when that was so much of my school experience, while I was drowning in this feeling of, I need to be as smart as these other students or smarter so I could get into this college, right? Mm-hmm. It was, why didn't I not learn a single life skill to manage all that stress and pressure they were already putting on me that would just continue throughout my life?
And I think the mistake that a lot of people make, especially at schools, is they think either kids can't handle that conversation, which is so wrong. You can scale mental health conversations to literally any grade level. And then two, I think a lot of times schools think that if they talk about mental health, it'll be a therapy. And it doesn't have to be. Like my school teaches about mental health once a week, every week from grades 6 through 12. And we don't use therapeutic practices. We use kind of health educational skill building practices like you're talking about. And so I do think there's a lot of like fear around this topic of, okay, if we do this, what's it going to open up? And the reality is that young people can handle it. They do find a lot of topics interesting, but also you can do it without actually opening anything up or making it worse.
Yes, exactly. And there's this information, the stigma of if you talk about it, students are going to do it. So if you talk about suicide, they're going to end their life. And the reality of it is if you don't talk about it, right, then you live in silence and in shame. And you are more likely than if you're able to know there's someone you can reach out to and there's support available, or there's things you can do for yourself to help manage, right, those depressive thoughts, those anxious thoughts. So we're not preparing them with the tools and we are fueling the shame and the stigma around it. we are essentially hurting them without even meaning to, which is so frustrating. The system is unintentionally unhelpful.
It's not only unhelpful, it's also like a lot of times people try to approach a topic like suicide from being like, okay, if a kid's thinking about suicide, what do we need to do to approach that kid? And that by that point, like that kid is already on that journey. It's so much more important to have a culture and a community at a school where mental health is normalized to the point where if somebody does have those thoughts, they know that it's okay to seek help instead of just being reactive, instead of just being like, oh, our school had a suicide, which is obviously devastating. So now we're going to do these suicide prevention trainings. If you infiltrate mental health across the school, and it's not just like a weekly class, it's also seen in other lessons, other sections like math, science, art, English, history, music, all those other things, then the kids see like, oh, this is an actual culture that focuses on mental health as opposed to, okay, suicide's a problem, so we're just going to focus on that. And that is the work that I think schools can do. And I think a lot of them are trying to start it now, but it is a challenge.
Yeah, it is. And I hate that the system is so focused on reaction and intervention. Like, I don't know why we're so afraid of prevention, right? Of just having these conversations. And it can start as early as in kindergarten, just teaching how to say an affirmation, right? How to talk with kindness to yourself before the outer voices become your inner voice, right? Before they start telling you that you didn't learn the lesson well enough in X amount of days, therefore you failed and your future is at risk, right? Before we get there, because that's the way we want to navigate like schools and the education system. What if we taught kids just how to be kind to themselves or how to ask a friend, how are you, instead of making it a greeting, right? What if we could just teach these small little shifts as they grow? I mean, we have like physical education class. And I know for me, I don't know what I did for like 12 years of it. I really don't. I think we played kickball most of the time. So how hard would it have been to add like at least one conversation in there?
Yeah, and different schools are going to be capable of different things, right? So like in a public school, yeah, I think they can definitely add certain things in that aren't necessarily, oh, we're going to do this mental health lesson now, but teach that kind of skill that you're talking about. And don't make it this like big, like, all right, kids, now we're going to do the mental health thing. And then as you look at like independent schools could adjust to create a mental health environment if they wanted to create time in the schedule for it. And unfortunately, like you said, a lot of them are on this like path of academics, but your line of success and your hopes for success in the future aren't going to be nearly as high as if you can't balance that academics. Charter schools can do the same thing. Like we don't need to wait for state laws to change to be able to do mental health in the way that you just said. You can have caring or interested individuals start doing things that build that community that we're talking about that don't have to be this like, and now kids mental health, because that also kind of unintentionally stigmatizes it too.
Exactly. It's one thing I loved when I came into your school was the student saying like, it's part of everything, right? It's not just like you have that class once a week, like you said, but it's in everything. It's not a competition, it's cooperation. They work together, right? You're playing to their different strengths, all the different courses that you have. And I know for me, the hardest part was it was always a competition. Everything in school was a competition. You were set up to not really make friends, but to see your friends as someone you have to beat and be better than. And it made it so hard. And it's like, you're right. We don't have to wait for state laws to change. We don't have to wait. We can change the way we're approaching our education system. We can stop putting kids up against each other because a few years down the line, right? A decade down the line, if you're still going through life as everyone is my competition, I can't trust anyone, I have to be better than everyone. One of the most important parts of being human is that connection and feeling safe and loved. And like you have somewhere to go in those moments where you just need someone to sit with you or hold your hand for a moment.
Yeah, and like you said too, like that is what can ultimately make the difference is knowing that we're in this together versus I'm on this on journey on my own. And you can even have like a school that does try to get the best out of kids and just try to get the best out of their academics and still have it be humane and still have it be meaningful. And so some of that though is intentional by the other educators, like the person who's teaching like photography or design will talk about how art is a escape for an anxiety disorder or his anxiety issues, or you have the English teachers talking about writing as a coping mechanism and understanding how to tell your story, or you have history teachers talking about the emotional effects of historical events instead of just here was a genocide, here was war, here was this thing. And so there are ways to just humanize a school. And not only does it help them see that like they're not alone, but that throughout history, people have felt alone or have felt this pressure or have felt like all these other things. And as you know too, like one of the biggest things that gives people mental health is a sense of purpose or a sense of understanding where they are. And teens need that, and college students need that so much.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Just thinking about like art class or when I had to take journalism and creative writing, all those classes. One thing that I was so frustrated with when I came out of the psych unit and like a year later, I was like, oh, wait, coloring, like I colored cards, that's a form of expression and comfort and coping to me. Why did no one ever put that line together? Why didn't I know that was something I could do when I was feeling sad? And then being able to talk about it in school and learn, like, yeah, you have to take an art class or a drawing class, whatever it is. But this is also a skill that maybe you can use in the future, right? Like, yeah, you have to take a writing class and we might be grading your grammar, but this is also something that you can do to express yourself or better understand yourself or create something to put out into the world, right? It's not just for a grade. Mm-hmm. And I love that shit.
And that's something I saw even like today with my seniors. So I had somebody graduate a few years ago and came to me and he was like, the one thing I wish senior wellness would have prepared me for was you never taught us a lesson on how to say goodbye to people. And I was like, well, that's really interesting. And so I started doing the lessons since then. And I take our students' advice all the time where I'm like, all right, if they have a need, like, let's fill it. And so today I asked the senior class, like, how many of you have plans for how you're going to say goodbye to people? And a bunch of them answered, like, I'm going to write letters. I'm going to write notes to like the different people who I'm going to miss so that they can read it at all times. And that was like so refreshing. It just ties into what you're saying to hear, because even something like saying goodbye isn't normalized. It's just not. And like, so when the lesson starts, you can see the kids kind of be like, why are we doing this? And then halfway through, they start getting emotional. They're like, oh my gosh, like I'm going through this stage of my life and I never considered this piece. And then by the end, they're like, all right, I got to make sure I do this, because not only does it matter to them, but the emotional response they get from others is also important.
Yeah. And it's like a form of grief, right? You're transitioning to a new place, the start of your future, the stress of that. And then the people you've been with for so many years, right? Suddenly they're not going to be there every day. You may lose touch with them. I lost touch with almost every single friend from high school. I think I still have like 3 from high school that I talked to, but it was how different it was when you go somewhere where everyone's a new face, where for the last decade of your life, it was all the same people all around you. That's a big shift. And how do you said, say goodbye and know that this might be the end for us, but I enjoyed, right, having you in my life and the time we spent together. That's something I'm always going to remember. Or it could also be like, thank goodness I'm now learning a boundary, right, to say goodbye and not continue a relationship that isn't healthy for me. So it kind of gives you a balance of both.
Yeah, or like we had a conversation today because, some of these kids are the youngest in their family, so they're going to go in an empty nest, or some of them are the oldest, like, the family dynamic is going to change. And so a lot of kids share that they're, worried about how they're going to have to manage other people's emotions in the transition. And they come up with really great stuff. Some of them, will say like, well, I'll talk to them about like what they can do for themselves or how they can take care of their own mental health during it. But to your point, friend, like these are the lessons kids need. Like they need this as they're making this adjustment in their life because it is the first time they're making this kind of large adjustment to what's going on. And it's not the last time they'll adjust to life after college and things like that. But even just having a moment to hear like, yeah, this is going to change your family and it could be different, but it doesn't mean it's bad. You can be homesick, you can miss things and make this adjustment successfully. And so, I think these are the kinds of things that at least I see that kids need. And it's not just in senior year. We do a healthy relationships class in 10th grade, but it's a deep dive into how to maintain a relationship. So it is understanding your own self-defining memories and what you bring in. It is attachment theory and conflict resolution and codependency and love languages and all that other stuff. And so 3 years ago, I had two students who were like, we need to do a lesson on situationships because a lot of young people today aren't just like in relationships. They're in these weird gray area situationships. And they created a lesson on situationships that we still use every year. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about a school where you talk about this issue is you can learn with each other and you can make adjustments because you listen to the kids. And if it's valid, look, we've had many ideas that I would not be like, oh, we need a lesson on that. But the valid ones, you're like, look, this is generated by them because they feel trusted and seen enough to do it.
Well, and just listening to them and hearing what they're going through and what they're experiencing, right? For the first time, we're really seeing this generation, or they're vocalizing it now, right? Whereas prior generations really weren't. So we have an opportunity where people are starting to be willing to talk about it. Why wouldn't we be listening to them? Why wouldn't we try to meet them where they're at and give them some kind of support? They're going through situationships. That's so hard, especially in high school, when every TV show you're watching, right, is like this great love. And then a bunch of your friends are in these, what seems like a perfect relationship from the outside, and you're on social media and you're seeing all these grand gestures happening with all these influencers, perfect relationships. It's so hard to sit there and be like, why does my relationship not look like that? How do I get that? If we're not listening to what they're going through, we can't even begin to support them. So I love that you do that.
Well, yeah. And a lot of times people say they're doing healthy relationships, but they just talk about like consent, or they talk about what's wrong, or they talk about all these other problems happening. And they don't talk about like the actual ways to manage it. They don't talk about, the good things and the communication pieces and stuff like that. And so, like you said, they do have these ideals of like relationship goals and stuff like that. But when they get talked to, it's more in the line and the vein of something is wrong versus like, this is what's right. And this is what feels good.
Oh, yes. I think that was one of the hardest skills to learn in relationships, whether it's romantic or with friends or even like my parents, is how to really communicate to a point where I'm listening and not just responding, right? We don't learn those tools. So it took so long to be in relationships where it wasn't just, I'm fighting with you to get my point across, to be heard, right? To actually sit there and be able to communicate, to disagree without fighting, right? We don't learn these tools that are part of a healthy relationship, whether it's, again, romantic or platonic. And without that, it ends up feeling so isolating inside. And then you're taught not to talk about anything. So it just gets worse.
Yeah. And then when you start going down that spiral, relationships are such a huge part of life. Then you're like, oh, who can I trust? What can I trust? What can I build? And so, like you said earlier, you get that pressure, you see those things, you start going downhill, and then you don't have the skills to bring you back out. And so for me, it's, not even that normalizing conversations about relationships is important. It's also giving skills that actually help them change and grow.
Yeah, it all comes back to these tools that we can teach early on, right? Every year you really can start to teach small things that make such a difference. Learning to say, no, I'm not comfortable with that, instead of being pressured to always say yes and do what other people want to make other people happy, right? Being able to learn the difference between, yes, I want to be supportive for someone, and no, that makes me feel uncomfortable. We could be teaching that at a younger age. We can be teaching so many different things. Okay, so going to your school, Geffen Academy, how did you begin to build that out so that maybe other teachers or people who work within schools can maybe start to understand what that actually looks like?
So the thing we did was we built a mental health education institute that we run every summer. And what we do with the institute is just provide kind of the basic things that schools can do. So one is mental health literacy, which is how do you teach mental health the same way you teach physical health from that health education approach? Like, how do we actually make comparisons between physical health and mental health? So one basic thing is a lot of young people don't have a definition for mental health. They think it's having a problem, not that it's building these skills to address the things occurring in your life, right? Or people know the difference between a sprained ankle and a broken leg, but they don't know the difference between like feeling nervous versus having an anxiety disorder, or having an everyday challenge versus having like a neurodivergent issue, things like that. So once schools can have a common language for mental health, then they can build it into these other classrooms in different ways, right? The other thing we do is we do provide a general curriculum that people can use. So kind of a 8-lesson curriculum that anybody can use in different ways and keep it focused on health education. And then the other thing we do is we provide guidelines on how any teacher teaching any subject can use lived experience in their classroom as a way to reinforce a learning objective. So like I shared earlier, for an art teacher, they can share that like they've had experiences with anxiety and art is an outlet for that. Or for a science teacher, they can share like a personal experience with some kind of, emotional episode or whatever else and tie it into brain science. Or one year we had a teacher come who was a science teacher at a different school and used their own personal experience with biomarkers and how that affected their life, and then did a lesson on biomarkers. So the lived experience piece is really important because we are not as interesting as social media or cell phones, but when we use lived experience appropriately, it can really make a lesson come alive. And so the Institute focuses kind of on those three things. And then we have seen it implemented in public schools, charter schools, alternative schools, and have it be successful.
I really love the lived experience piece because I remember like putting my teachers up on a pedestal, right? Like these were humans that knew everything, right? And I was just trying to learn from them. I was really big on school. And if I knew that, like, oh, they also would experience these big feelings that were really overwhelming for me, right? Someone who I'm perceiving as has all of this knowledge, right? And knows what they want to do and wants to help kids, right? And help the next generation, someone I'm seeing in such a positive light. They've also gone through it. And these are things that have helped them. I'm a lot more inclined to, one, see myself as someone who has potential. I'm more inclined to maybe reach out to my teacher, right? Because they get what I'm feeling. And more inclined to actually adapt some of those skills, be someone that I like and I look up to in a way is now actually using them and vouching for them.
Yeah, and that is the culture piece I was talking about earlier, right? So like if you trust your teacher, then when you do have an issue, you might be willing to talk to them. And again, our teachers aren't therapists. They're not trained to manage mental health issues, but they can be there to just push you to the counselor or somewhere else. But if mental health is normalized, to be honest with you, like it doesn't usually get to that point. A kid doesn't usually get to the point of like, oh, well, now I also have an anxiety disorder. I'm in a panic attack. So let me tell the photography teacher. They have it normalized to a point where like they also know where to go.
Yeah. I love that. I remember my junior year of high school, my parents were separating and divorcing. And everything felt so overwhelming and my entire personality shifted overnight. I went from being like really excited to head down, not talking to anyone. And my Brit Lit teacher was the one who grabbed me after class and was like, something's wrong, something changed. Can we talk about it? And after I talked to her about it, she every day brought me a cake pop to school. So every morning, because she knew I liked the birthday cake pops. So I would have something to look forward to every day, right? And I had someone who was just checking in and letting me know that I wasn't alone. And not to get to bring your students like a cake pop every day, but the idea of it was that someone cared enough to notice and then made me feel like I mattered, right through it. And there was still something to look forward to each day. It made such a difference at that time because I felt like I was crumbling. I felt like the world was crumbling beneath me. And all I needed was someone else to recognize that, because love my parents. They're amazing. They didn't have the emotional capacity in that moment in time because they were going through it and they didn't have any mental health education or tools to be able to recognize. They saw it as, this is my experience. This has nothing to do with my kids. And all I needed at that point was just someone to see me and recognize, like, oh, she's also feeling big things. And when my teacher did that, it really helped me get through the next year and a half of high school.
And that's the normalizing piece. It doesn't have to be a cake pop. It can just be walking around the hallway and saying hi to someone, or getting to know them outside of their lives and checking in. Just different things that are helpful, that are like, hey, I see that you exist, and I want to, validate that in some way. And it's great that you had that experience, for sure. It is also helpful when teachers do that in their small ways. And the reality too is, a lot of teachers are doing this, but nobody gives them that institute, like I said, over the summer, that is teaching them and training them on how to do it. And so that's kind of why we started doing it.
It's so important and so impactful. And to know that someone's out there doing that makes me, I don't want to say happy, but just, I know what that feeling was like. And I'm so grateful I had it. And if teachers had the tools, right, it really can make a difference for so many students.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the hope. If we're going to change education, we're going to have to do it in a way that is subtle shifts. It's not this like massive statewide change. It's showing up and being intentional and building a community where people can have their mental health needs met. And also, don't forget, like, teachers are people too. I mean, teachers have so many things piled on them, where we feel like we're now parents and learning specialists and like all these other things. So having some guidelines also gives them boundaries to not cross and makes them feel a little bit safer in the work that they do.
Yeah, because so many teachers also just never got the mental health education to know what to do. Right. So if we're not equipping them with tools, we are adding extra stress and pressure onto them in a system that's very underfunded, right? That doesn't always prioritize teachers' living or just anything that they need.
Right.
So if we can begin to give them some kind of tools instead of adding more pressure and keep your students going, right, and know what to say and when to say it and how to say it, we actually gave them some tools. It can help the teacher actually be more present and not so much in their head on, what do? I don't want to cause harm. I can't talk about it. Instead, it's like, oh, I know what to do. I know what to say. I have the language now. Maybe I didn't before. I can actually be that support that the kid needs.
And most professional development trainings for teachers are the like, don't, and not the do this. Do build community, do find ways to connect with students, do help support them. And oftentimes when schools do give teachers this information, they are able to find that it lessens their workload instead of increases it. Like, if you do small things to check in and understand mental health, it doesn't add to your workload. It actually makes it better for the whole school, including the teachers themselves.
Yeah. I mean, and also just imagine if all the kids were in competition against each other all the time, right? And they were taught to build community, that they can reach out to each other. Maybe the teachers didn't have to grade so hard on all the assignments because they were trying to, I remember having like weed out classes, right? The classes that were meant to fail students, to see who was at the top and who wasn't, to separate between who was going to take AP classes and who wasn't, right? Imagine if we didn't put that kind of pressure on teachers, and instead the form of pressure is just show up and be present and let the kids learn to be present with each other. Like, how much of a difference that could change on both sides. Just hear me out. That was terrible. Degrading of all of it.
And there's so many teachers that are overwhelmed with all the grading they have to do. And so, like, again, building that community around that can really help as well.
I remember one teacher in my senior year was like, I am required to give you an exam. I'm required to give you X amount of papers. She's like, no one said what they have to be. but I'm required to give you this. Everyone will get an A, a B if you don't finish it, like if you don't do it. But if you just fill it out, you can have the A. I'm required to give you so many assignments that you can't breathe, I can't breathe, right? So if we can shift that internally. We can begin to actually create, like you said, implement it into these conversations, into our lessons plans. What that was like throughout history, how it impacted people. It doesn't have to take away from the content. It can just be a new way of explaining it and approaching how we teach failing versus succeeding. I'm so mad about it to this day.
And what's interesting too is like if you look at what the AI schools are doing right now. So AI schools use AI tutors to challenge kids to learn better, and it's a select group of kids that have intrinsic motivation that want to learn that way. But they spend 2 hours learning off of AI tutors and then 4 hours focusing on mental health. So if the AI schools are already shifting to, hey, for the future, kids are going to need mental health skills, what are the rest of the schools doing? Why are we so far behind that? And what can we do to change it? And so I think that the main thing we focus on is it's not these massive, big trainings that are therapeutic and everyone has to change. It is the small things you do to change the culture of your classroom, to change the culture of your school that address what you said, the pressure piece, but also just that skill building that lets a kid know, like, this is how I navigate this situation.
Looking back at your like experience in school as a kid and growing up, and then what you do now, what are like the biggest changes that, I guess, positive changes that you've seen that you're excited about?
They always say, like, like when you're writing a book, like write the book you wish you could have read. And I think the same thing happened when I became a founding faculty member of the school. It was like, all right, let's create a school that you didn't have, right? And so when I went through my own experiences with depression in my senior year and attempted to take my own life, and my self-hatred from like 10th through 12th grade, where I was binge drinking as my only coping mechanism, the hardest thing that I think I went through was I felt like it was really a sign of weakness to talk about your emotions and that you should just be able to suck it up and deal with it on your own. And so the best advancement I had from my experience as a kid to this experience at the school is just trying to let kids know that they're not alone. And that does take a lot of strength to talk about these issues. The changes I've seen over the 20 plus years of my advocacy, where it took steps to get here. And so the first step really was creating just large scale presentations or assemblies around mental health so that people knew that it was something they could talk about, that awareness piece was important. Then it was important to create curriculum to make sure that people had a curriculum that was similar to physical health. And now I think it is this school approach of bringing lived experience and creating a common language for schools to follow so that everybody can be on the same page. So it has been an extremely personal journey to go from the kid who did attempt to take his own life in his senior year of high school to being a teacher and a person who runs an institute to try and make schools better so that kids who are going through that, because we're never going to like remove that, at least know that they're not alone and can at least build skills to be able to address it.
I like the idea of this is what I needed back then, so I'm going to create it for someone else. And imagine if we all did that. We just reflected for a little bit on this is the tool I needed. This is the conversation I needed. And how can I begin to implement that? The next generation makes such a difference. Thank you for the work you're doing, because I know without a doubt that if I had these kinds of conversations and tools back in high school, it would have been so much easier to navigate that transition period. College, being able to transition from having grandparents to losing grandparents, right? To the first time of loss and grief and saying goodbye. Right? If I just had any of these things, I am pretty sure I could have managed a little bit. It would have been less scary. It would have been so much less scary because it was so dark in my brain and I didn't know where to go, who to talk to, or what to do. And having some of these tools now, it makes the darkness that sometimes appears a lot less scary. I can look for the light. I can find it because I know what I can do. Mm-hmm. And I just wish I had that earlier. So thank you for what you're doing. I really appreciate what you're doing for the next generation.
And thank you for everything you're doing. I mean, your workbooks and all of your work and everything you're doing at D.D. Hirsch and at UCLA and all that other stuff, it makes such a big difference. It inspired the next generation when you came to our school and our students were like, wow, Fran's doing so much great stuff. How can we also, write letters to people or do things like that? And so your impact and your reach and your voice has meant so much to so many people. And I love that we got to connect over what we would have changed and how both of us were able to put that in action.
Thank you. I'm so happy we connected as well. As we are wrapping up, or to wrap up our episode, what is one last thing you'd like to leave our audience with?
This is okay. Let me make sure that one last thing.
Impression.
Yeah. I think that we talked a lot about teachers, but I do want to remind people that anyone can actually do this work. Anyone can check in with someone and ask them how they're really doing, like you did at the start of this. Anyone can develop a common language for mental health in their family, in their friendships, in their relationships, that this work isn't just done in schools. It can happen everywhere. I always tell people that, like, you never know where sharing your story is going to take you. And obviously people always see the advocacy I did and the books and the school and all that other stuff. But the most important thing that telling my story did was it helped heal my family, that it gave my dad, who had gone through so much trauma as a kid, a chance to feel his emotions, that it gave my mom a chance to at least reflect on her life, that it let my brothers and I heal in a different way so that we can be there to support our nephews. So, I think sometimes we focus so much on storytelling from a place of, oh, like you can help all these other people, but any healing you can bring to your family is also really helpful.
It's such a positive chain of reaction. It just takes one small step or one big step. Ross, thank you so much for joining me today. How can people learn more about you, connect with you?
Yeah, so the Mental Health Education Institute is at Geffen Academy at UCLA every summer. You can go on Geffen Academy's website and find it. And then the easiest way to see what I'm doing is on Instagram, which is just at Ross Szabo with the 3 S's in between.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.